Okay guys, yesterday we went over the viruses, bacteria, and protists, and today we're going to go over what they call the upper kingdoms, which are the fungi, plants, and animals. So the main distinction between these and the ones that we did yesterday is these are, all of them except one, is multicellular, which means you could have up to billions and billions of cells making up an organism. Okay, so we're going to start with fungi. So, is there a fungus among us? Kingdom fungi are decomposers of the world, okay? So that's why we actually need them tremendously. So they are eukaryotic, which means they have a nucleus. Remember, they are heterotrophs. They do not get their food from the sun or create it themselves. They actually have to physically eat. Now, obviously, you don't picture a mushroom like putting food in his mouth, okay? But they do absorb their nutrients, so that still makes them heterotrophs, okay? All of them are multicellular, like I said, except for yeast, and I'm sure you've heard of yeast in terms of baking and cooking and things like that. They have a cell wall made out of chitin, which is interesting because that's the same material that makes out the exoskeleton of some bugs, so that's pretty cool. Okay, and remember their most important job is recycling. There are decomposers. Okay, so here are some pictures of the 4 groups of fungi. Your mold and mildew fit into one group. This is a picture of yeast here, the only single-celled fungus. Your mushrooms are the 3rd group, and then the last group, which are called imperfect fungi, is your penicillin. So it was actually discovered as an antibiotic by mistake. It's kind of a cool story, but this is a fungus. You can tell that its job is to decompose that rotting orange. So that's what fungi are for. Okay? All right, so very briefly into the plant kingdom. Remember, this is the kingdom that is completely autotrophic. So every member of the plant kingdom can create its own food through photosynthesis, and we will talk about photosynthesis later on. They have a nucleus around their DNA, and the 2 most distinguishing things is they have their chloroplast, which allows them to do their photosynthesis, and then they also have chlorophyll, which is the pigment that makes most plants green. Okay, so there are actually 4 groups of plants. Your mosses, your ferns, your gymnosperms, which is anything that is like cone related, and then your flowering plants. So this order is exactly how they've evolved. Let me move myself for a minute. Okay, so here are your mosses, here are your ferns, here are your cone-bearing plants, and here's an example of a flowering plant. So the difference here is, I want to show you something with these 3 here. These can actually grow very tall. Okay, and the reason for that is they have veins in them. They are called vascular plants. If you've looked up close at a blade of grass or a tree leaf, you know they have veins in them. So they can get water from the tip of the roots to the very tip top of the plant, even if it's 100 foot tall. Okay, mosses cannot do that. Mosses are considered non-vascular. They do not have veins, so they cannot grow very tall. Some people call these the green carpet of the world. It's really soft, always feels wet, only grows on the north side of some things, different tricks like that. Okay, all right, then let's hop into the animal kingdom just very briefly. Okay, this is the last group that evolved. I'm sure you guys remember that. Eukaryotic, multicellular, there is no single-celled animal, okay? All animals must eat somehow. We have no cell wall. So that is actually what distinguishes us from fungi. Most of our other characteristics are similar, okay? We're obviously the most complex. We're the last ones to evolve on the planet. And how they classify animals is they first put them in a group as to whether they have a backbone or not, okay? And I'll show you all those in just a second. So I want to mention something to you about symmetry. And if you guys have done anything probably in math or especially in art, symmetry is actually very important. It's basically how many ways can you cut an organism exactly in half, okay? So there are 3 kinds of symmetry. I'm going to start with the one in the middle because I think it probably makes the most sense to you. Bilateral, that literally means 2 sides. So just like with this lobster that's in this picture here, if you would think of me, you can cut me right between my eyes, right down the middle, right through your belly button and down, and cut me into 2 equal pieces. That's what bilateral symmetry means. Now, it doesn't necessarily work on the inside of the body, okay, because you know I only have one heart and it's actually more to the left. You only have one stomach and it's kind of more to the right, but like physically on the outside, you can make two equal sides, just like this lobster here. Okay, now the other one that's kind of easy is no symmetry. Obviously, it's exactly what it says. There is no way you could divide that organism into equal parts. So that example there is a sponge, and there is no way that I could actually cut this sponge and have two equal pieces. Okay, now the last one is a little bit harder to understand for kids. This one is called radial symmetry, but I do want you to think of like the radius of a circle or the spokes on a bicycle wheel, okay? So basically it means there are several ways, sometimes even infinite number of ways where you can cut these organisms in half. Okay, so this species right here, this is called a hydra. It's almost like a grounded version of a jellyfish. And you see all those little glass panes that they used? There are many, many ways you can cut that organism in half. Okay, so generally speaking, if the base of the organism is round, it'll work. Think of like a pizza. Okay, if you just took a pizza out of an oven, there are many number of ways where you can cut that in half. Okay, that's called radial symmetry. Okay, so the first group of animals I want to talk to you about are the invertebrates, and I'm just going to kind of show you some. These are not even all the phyla of invertebrates, but I wanted to show you the majority of them, and they actually start here. Porifera is the simplest of all animals. These are your sponges, and then it goes to Cnidaria. They are known for their stinging cells, so your anemones and your jellyfish fit into this category. Okay, then you're going to have your worms, and this is only showing one group of worms, but there's actually three. Your earthworms, your hookworms, tapeworms, those kind of things fit here. Okay, then come your mollusks. They're known for their soft body. This is where you'll see your snails and oysters and clams and octopus and squid and things like that. And then come your arthropods, which actually means jointed feet. So think of your lobsters, your insects, your spiders, all the shrimp, all those things fit in there. And just so you know, 95% of all the animals on Earth actually fit into this category. And I know that seems unrealistic, but think about like how many ants there are in one ant pile, right? Especially in eastern North Carolina. Think about all the mosquitoes. So it is a little bit more realistic when you think about it that way. Okay, and then the last group of invertebrates are your starfish and sea urchins and stuff. Echinoderm, that actually means spiny skin. And this is your last group of invertebrates before you hop on to vertebrates, which are the most advanced. Okay? All right, so then let's take a look at vertebrates really quickly. And these are not in the right order that I would teach them in, but I will do it that way. So the first group are your fish. Now, there are actually two groups of fish, okay? There are your bony fish, like your tuna, your guppies, your goldfish, and then there are also cartilaginous fish, so your sharks, your skates, and your rays. But they are all considered fish because they have gills and they lay eggs, they have scales, all those kind of things, okay? Then your next group would be your amphibians, your frogs, toads, salamanders. They're kind of unique because, you know, that's a group that goes through metamorphosis. They do part of their life in the water, part of their life on land, and then they go back to the water to reproduce. So that's kind of cool. Okay, then your next group are your reptiles. These are cold-blooded, as we call it, but they have a better way of controlling their body temperature, and they also are the first group of animals that do not rely on water to reproduce. So like they lay their eggs in a nest, right? Most of them anyway. They have a shell over them, just like a chicken egg would, all right? And then your next group would be your birds. First group to be completely endothermic, it actually is the right term for warm-blooded. Feathers, hollow bones, lungs, most are capable of flight, but not all of them. Okay, and then your last group are your mammals, which is of course where we belong. Most of them give birth, but some of them, you know, don't. There are a couple that still lay eggs. There's a couple of them that have marsupials, right? The pouch. They all have hair or fur. All mammals can feed their young milk. All of them have lungs. And of course, all of them are warm-blooded, and we can be in just about any habitat. Okay, so those are the kingdoms that I wanted to go over with you today. They're called the upper kingdoms just because they are usually the larger organisms that you can see with the naked eye. So if you would complete your assignment that goes with us, and we're all done for today. Thank you.